Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Good morning, everybody. This is Howard Fox, and welcome to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Michael Wynne. Michael is the president of International Management Consulting Associates. Mike specializes in global management consulting. He is a globally recognized professional speaker, executive coach, board director coach, and global executive acculturation coach. Mike is also the author of the book, Leadership Skills You Need for Global Business Success. Mike, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Mike, I think today's interview with you is very timely. And for our listeners, it is the end of March. We are in the midst of this global crisis right now with the growth and the management of this healthcare crisis, the coronavirus, COVID-19, that globally it's afflicting countries throughout the world. And this background you have in global business and acculturation on a global scale, I think is extremely timely. And I wonder if we could at least start, before we kind of dive into the nitty-gritty, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I've been working with two languages, English and Spanish. I learned Spanish years ago. The business, I was working at the time of the book in Mobil Oil, or the Mobil Chemical, actually, that part of the Mobil company. And I had been appointed by Mobil Oil, and Mobil Chemical, to run a business in Colombia. Because I knew a lot about Colombia, because I had been there a number of times, had understood and learned a lot about it, and learned the language. And because of that, they had acquired one company in Colombia that they were having trouble making it profitable. Unfortunately, when they appointed me, they had not told me that it had been losing money for 4 years. It was a real surprise when I got there to run this company that they had acquired a few years before. The problem was that they assumed that losing money was the way that it had to be. They just wanted to reduce the loss. When I got there, I met with the staff and the people, the employees and executives and people who ran things. It was a factory that produced paint, because it was a chemical business, and they had been in Colombia for some time. It was a real surprise in that sense, but I knew enough about chemistry that it was not impossible to understand them. And I made it a point when I got there to make it clear to the people who reported to me that, yes, I was going to be the general manager, but we was the key word. Everything had to be us. And I wanted to make it clear to them that I was there to help them help me. And we would work as a team. And so I made those points, and I described to the people who reported to me that this was something that they could do very well, even better than me, because they really knew the local market and the people and all those things. It made it easier. And one of the key things I would recommend to everybody who's going to go in global, and as you said, right now we're all global because of that infection. The key was that in order to be successful in global business, you have to respect the people of the countries you're dealing with. You have to show respect, and you have to have courtesy with those people, and you have to make them feel comfortable. And so those were some of the things we talked about and began to practice and do. And I mentioned to the employees that reported to me that we were going to work as a team. And they thought, saying, what do you mean, we're going to play soccer? I said, no. I said, no, but it's a good idea. However, here's what we're going to do. My boss, headquarters, will tell me what they want to do, and they will suggest things I might be able to do. But this is going to be us, you and me, working together, and everything would be about us. We began to work that way, and I told them that we would be given problems to manage and to handle, and that we would work together to understand the problems and then work as a team to come up with solutions. And they kind of liked that because I was showing respect for them. And one of the key things about doing business all around the world is you must show respect for the other people. And particularly if you're going to be selling in another country, you have to show respect for them. And there are many different ways to show respect. One of them is to learn about their history. We Americans go to another country and we don't even know who the president is. That doesn't work. We have to do our homework, learn about the country, learn about the people, learn about what they like, learn what is sensitive for them, what they're uncomfortable with. And we're working at creating respect. And respect is really global. All the countries expect to be respected, and you have to show that. And I learned that and showed it to them. And we did it, and we did things that would bring us together with our customers and also with the staff within the company, because it was a productive company that's producing chemical products, and so it was running a factory. And the fellow who had been running this job before me had only focused on production, not anything else. He did pay attention to networking and becoming part of the business community. So all of these things were very important, and we began to do them as a team. And they liked the idea of a team. At first, they felt a little bit unsure. I would have to make them feel comfortable about working with me. And things that we never think about as Americans is every day with other people in other countries, we have to be respectful and we have to show that they're important and that we want to work with them and we were there to help one another. So all of those things started to make a difference. Plus, the company had distributors in the various cities of Colombia, and they had never been to the factory, to the mobile factory there in Colombia. So I made it a point to contact each of the distributors in the different cities in that country and invite them to the capital to meet with me and other distributors.
That's a wonderful idea. How long were you assigned to this role in Colombia at this factory?
I was meant to be there and making it successful to get it to stop losing money. As I discovered, they've been losing money for 4 years, and to build a business that was successful, and also to get more customers, get more business. And when I was talking about the distributors, they were in different cities, and they had never been to the headquarters of the mobile chemical company right there in Colombia. So I invited them to come there to join a dinner and get to meet one another and learn about them, and they could learn about me and more, and then they would feel more comfortable in the distribution. So,
Mike, I got a question again. I guess if we can go back just for a second, because I want to continue your points, because you're essentially telling a great story about this journey of you and the transformation of this plant. Just for our listeners' sake, I mean, when you were asked to go down to this plant in Colombia, it doesn't matter the year, but when you went down there, first, how long were you there in total? And also, how long this transformation that you've described, changing a culture of an organization or changing, getting them to go from not really understanding their part in the organization to understanding we are in this together. We have to support each other. We have these distributors that are located throughout the country. They're a part of what helps make this organization a success. I would imagine that took a number of years. So, when you first got to Colombia, actually, maybe it's just important. What year was that?
That was back in the 60s.
So that was back in the 60s. And then how much time did you spend in this factory working or in the being responsible for the business in Colombia? How much time did you spend there?
It was about 6 years.
6 years. And when you got there and you started, and again, we're for our listeners, we're actually diving in a little bit indirectly into Mike's book, Leadership Skills You Need for Global Business Success. And we'll provide links back to the book that you can find on Amazon. Mike, this transformation that you described, where you got to the point you're starting to work with the distributors, you probably were kind of like for the sake of a better analogy, a fish out of water. This is kind of a foreign environment for you in a way. How did you get acclimated or acculturated to this new environment coming from the U.S.? And that must have been kind of stressful, I would imagine.
Well, earlier in my personal life, I had been in different countries with my parents. They took me to Colombia a good number of years before I went there with Vogel. I did have an understanding of the way people thought. As a matter of fact, for a while, I was going to school in a school that was run by Jesuits, and they were very good. And I had to learn Spanish with them. It made a big difference. So I understood the environment and the people and the things that they believed in. And it made a big difference.
Okay, that's fair. And so you actually had some background experience that you were not a total novice. And I would imagine sometimes executives get sent into problem situations that need to be fixed, and they don't have this experience that you had. They're going in not really understanding. They're coming in as the cowboy on the white horse with guns blazing. I can fix this. Here's how you do things. That doesn't work. Again,
all around the world, showing respect is essential. And you go to different countries, people have different needs. They have the same needs also. But showing your respect, treating them well, using courtesy, being polite, and helping them with their problems are things that you can do. And in the book, the character, whose name was George, did work that way. And he began to find the importance of having a network, because just being the president of a company in that country doesn't mean that you are well known and that you have a good connection to the business world. And the problem that the guy who had been in the position that I got before I got there was he just focused on production, didn't think about all the other things. And he had no network. And so people didn't know he existed. And one of the key things, if you go to any country, is build a network. I have spoken as a professional speaker in 23 countries. And in all of them, I had to be able to speak their language or do it in English also. But again, the point was to make them feel comfortable with showing respect. And it's something that just paid off in every country I went to. So I learned those things as a professional speaker. And even though I didn't speak all the languages of the 23 countries that I spoke in, but a lot of them spoke English, which was good. Again, it's a matter of building relationships that can open doors for you. And in the book, George goes there and he's a production manager. He focuses on production initially. And then he begins to discover he does not know the business world in that country. And so he has to join commissions and societies and chambers and special groups, business groups, so that he can get to know and he can be known in the business world. And that makes a big difference. If all you do is just work in the factory and you don't go out and build relationships, you're not going to get any business at all.
That's what I liked about the book is, and I have to share with you, Mike, one of my favorite go-to books when it comes to team leadership is Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And as I was reading your book and going through the chapters, I love the story, the thread that was going through each chapter of, first George just arriving in Colombia, trying to make sense, why am I here? And then slowly, for sake of a metaphor, peeling back the onion of everything that's going on. And I love how you organize each one of those chapters as an element of what George was going through. And then at the end of the chapter, dissecting that chapter, what he was going through, into the questions and answers. And so each chapter of the book is a lesson in of itself. And I thought that was a really nice way to help explain some of the key points you're making today about, respect, courtesy, relationships, moving away from just being solely focused on one area, but looking at the bigger global picture of the business. And that's what I thought was an amazing part of the book. So I enjoyed that.
Well, there are things you learn from different parts of your life. I spent 8 years in the United States Air Force. I was training pilots about why they needed to have oxygen and at what altitudes. I had to put them in an altitude chamber, which is kind of like almost like a bus. And they can remove the air in there, and the pilots had to learn why they needed to have oxygen starting at 10,000 feet and all the way up, and even to 70,000 feet. Not all of them go to 70,000 feet, but I had to go through training on that for myself because I had to begin to help prepare people for space. So I had good training about training and getting people to work on things that were very important. So those are the things that helped me in that job in Colombia. I was trained by the U.S. Air Force on how to train people, and they were in all parts of the Air Force, and most of them were pilots, and some of them maybe weren't pilots, but they all had to learn, and they all had to practice, and they had to go through a chamber, an artificial chamber, which can create what they call explosive decompressions. So that raises the altitude within that metal container. And that in itself was good training about helping other people and showing respect for them and putting the information together and going through procedures and practices. So again, all of those things are in my book, even though I don't mention the Air Force there. It comes from that background of training pilots all over the country and putting them through inconvenience and why they had to have oxygen and why it meant a major difference that if they didn't have it, they would come down with very painful experiences. So all of those things helped me describe what George was learning in his job.
That is a valuable piece of information. you didn't share that, but I can now see that experience and training in the military, and I know how exacting they are, and training for every possible scenario and practicing it over and over and over again is so very important, because people need to understand when an order is given, this is why the order is being given. And that experience that you brought into the book, I can now see where that makes a lot of sense, because there, again, each chapter in the book, talked about one element of the struggle George was having, and then how through his mentor, Mike, I guess I was thinking Mike was you in a way. It's like you having a conversation with yourself, Mike. I've got to tell you that. Then David, his manager, and Xavier, the other gentleman who was, and anybody else that came into the picture, all of them are just involved with learning the whys. Here's why we're doing what we're doing. And I love how that just kind of played out in each one of the chapters. I am curious, you have spent many years on the global stage, working with companies, helping them to learn these lessons to be successful, not just to go as an American with this perception that they know everything and we're the be-all, end-all of the right way to do things, because that's clearly not the case. What do you take from how this pandemic is playing out on a global scale, where we have it originated in a province in China, then it's kind of made its way globally. Every country is doing different things. How do the lessons that you're learning or have learned, and for example, communicated in this book, are there lessons to be learned on a global scale for how we address this pandemic and work with our employees to understand why we're doing things? Are there lessons here? What do you think?
The Air Force gave me all kinds of experiences. It was during the Korean War, and they didn't send me to Korea. They sent me to Panama because I spoke Spanish, and they wanted to have somebody who could travel to each of the American embassies throughout Latin America to see how the employees were doing, how the foreigners who worked for the U.S. government in all those countries. So, and because I spoke Spanish, they sent me to do that. And I got to visit all the countries and learn a lot about that. But coming back, even if I hadn't had that experience, it is the point I've been making all the way through. And George, the character in the book, learns it and does a good job of it, is showing people how you're there to help them and doing your best to make them feel comfortable and even proud of themselves and help them to improve themselves. And one of the things I did with the employees in the mobile business was get them to think beyond just the day and the year, but think to the future and how that was going to affect not only the business, but their futures, and how they could be creative and be innovative because they needed to be different to succeed. So I would get the employees in the company to work with me to improve themselves and make them feel better about themselves. And that made a huge difference.
It seems that point to move beyond just the day, the year, but and look at themselves, the employees looking at themselves, looking at the business, and even the managers having that view as well. What can we do individually and collectively to stay in business, but also minimize our risks that we have? So I'm curious then, is that, this pandemic today, I mean, all of a sudden working from home virtually is like it's a new way of doing things. And many of us have been doing it for years. And if you were the leader inside this organization today, Mike, and you were back in Colombia, what would you be doing with your staff there to help not only the company, but the employees themselves to navigate this uncertainty in our lives?
I made it a point to create a form of respect for their knowledge that they had. Most of the people in the world, in the business world, work just thinking about that day's work, and they don't think beyond that. And I made it a point to have them think about the future as part of running the company, because we couldn't continue to work the same way every day for the rest of our lives. I had them begin to think about what things would change in the company that we could change, and to get them to think in terms of innovation, to make changes based on how the world is changing and how to prepare for the future. That our jobs were not just doing daily work, but preparing the company and the business for the future. What's going to happen? What things are we doing that are working right now that will change? It's like right now here in the States, being in 2020, in a world that is changing enormously and are going to continue to change. In the companies, they need to be thinking about that. They need to get their employees to think along those lines. You need to get them to become innovative, come up with ideas of how to do things better. And all of these things were designed for the company. It was also designed for them to make them comfortable, prepare them so that they can still be employed in the future and be even in better jobs. So again, the key is that showing respect, but getting them to think about the future and working with them about how are we going to run this company for next year? How are we going to do this in the next 2 years? What things are going to change? And they knew the country better than I did, so they could tell me those things. And we could work together to prepare all of ourselves to be better prepared for the job.
I can imagine, Mike, that there are managers within global companies located in specific countries having very similar conversations. They're not all the same conversations, but they're unique because each country, region is unique. But a good manager that understands these concepts that you keep raising, respect, courtesy, building relationships, how can we benefit ourselves and the company? How come those conversations should be happening in those countries today so that they can innovate, discuss, challenge, innovate to ensure that those companies are around a year from now, 5 years, 10 years from now and beyond. And the concepts and the advice you're giving, the consulting that you're giving in this book, I think it resonates, even more today, just given the nature of this global crisis that we're having. And so very timely, very timely. Mike, before we end the podcast today, again, I want to acknowledge, you have been a professional speaker for many years now. You're globally recognized and acknowledged by the National Speakers Association. How did you get involved in that area of your development?
Well, part of it was the experience I had in the Air Force of training pilots. Once I was back in the States, I joined the National Speakers Association and learned a lot about how to structure presentations and how to make audiences comfortable and how to produce information that is interesting and that can be vital to the future and the benefit of the people who are listening, and make them feel good about themselves as well as doing things well. And I'm seeing it right now here in the States where companies, I was talking to somebody the other day, these people are on the the members of the management of a company, and the person I was speaking with told me they were thinking about the future, and they plan for 10 years in the future. So what is the company going to be like in 10 years? And they're definitely going to be doing much better than companies that just live day by day.
Very good. Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today to give our listeners with your wisdom of an experience of having been on the global stage for many years. And I mean, this book, Leadership Skills You Need for Global Business Success, it is a very good book. And I would encourage our listeners, go out, get a copy if you are on the global stage, or maybe you have career goals to be out there and work on a global stage. This is a very good book for you to go out and have a good read. And certainly if you want to learn more about it, Mike invites you to connect with him on LinkedIn and to get to know him, about his work and what he's doing. Mike, in closing, you have any final thoughts you'd like to impart, or insights you'd like to impart to our audience about your work? Perhaps things that, for the manager that's struggling to keep things going today, again, in light of our current situation. Any pearls of wisdom, insights that you'd like to share?
Well, we all have to learn at some point that just doing the daily work is not enough, that there is a future, and we're seeing it right now with the coronavirus situation. That is going to change the world. It's doing it. And we're living, but even without that, we're living in a world that is changing constantly. Every day when we wake up, it's not the same world we were in the day before. And we have to learn to think that way. And it is a part of being successful, to be ready to meet the challenges that the future will bring. Even if we don't yet know them, they will show up. We have to be able to assimilate what's going on, find out about it, and start to plan, not only just now, but what are we going to be doing next year? And what are we going to be doing in 10 years? It doesn't sound like logical, but it is very logical, because today the world is changing much faster than it ever did before. And it's going to make a big difference in our future.
Most definitely. Mike, before we sign off, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Well, cell phone would make a big difference. Another way would be to connect through LinkedIn, and they could also call me, or send me messages, and I'd be very happy to help.
Fantastic. Well, we'll provide a link back to your LinkedIn profile on our show notes and use that as the vehicle for our listeners to reach out to you. That works. We'll also provide a link back to your book on Amazon, Leadership Skills You Need for Global Business Success. Mike, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today, and we wish you very well, and much success and good health in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Howard, and I hope we stay in touch, because I'd like to be part of your future and you be part of my future, too.
That sounds like a plan. I'm in. Most definitely. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Michael Wynne. Michael is the president of International Management Consulting Associates, and he is the author of Leadership Skills You Need for Business Success. We're going to provide links back to Mike's book on Amazon. We'll also, again, provide a link back to his profile on LinkedIn. And Mike invites you to connect with him and reach out if you would like to learn more about him and his work. And what I loved about this conversation with Mike, and typically, like, we have a book author, we're really focusing on the book and the structure, the experience of writing the book. But the nature of Mike's book it's on a global scale. It's global business success. And Mike's experience and some of the lessons he has provided in the book are very timely because of the issues we are facing today with the coronavirus. And I think at the, not just in the United States, but globally, we as leaders, managers, we need to be having conversations with our team about what they need, as well as how do we change? How do we adapt to this crisis to change and come out of this crisis with still a vibrant company and a vibrant workforce where everybody is continuing to feel valued and respected, and we're being dealt with courteously, and just so we continue to make a difference. So very timely conversation, even though the book itself is very focused on a manager, George, going into an organization and coming to grips with the issues they were facing and navigating that company with the employees through the change. So hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you care to, we'd love to hear your comments when we publish the show with Mike on our Success Insight podcast page. You can also find a link to the podcast on our LinkedIn page, Success Insight Podcast Company page. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and all the podcast platforms as well. So, do let us know what you think. And if, again, we can certainly can make introductions back to Mike via those platforms as well. So go out there, be safe, keep a safe distance. Think about the impact you need to make or you are making, what you can do differently in today's setting, the situation that we are in. But like we say every show, wherever you are, whatever you're doing or choose to do have a phenomenal day. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now, folks.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.